I'd like to welcome you to the Rural Entrepreneurial Leaders Network. In this webinar, we're looking at entrepreneurial stories, the roller coaster narrative.
I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background of the RAU and especially the School of Business and Entrepreneurship. The RAU has 4 schools, which are highlighted on the slide. So the School of Business and Entrepreneurship, the School of Agriculture, Food and Environment, the School of Real Estate and Land Management, and the School of Equine Management and Science. And we've just recently launched the Cultural Heritage Institute, which is going to be based in Swindon. So I'm the head of the School of Business and Entrepreneurship. My name is David Bozward. And our school is really a centre for excellence for developing entrepreneurial leaders. We've recently achieved the IOE Centre of Excellence of only 1 in 6 universities in the UK that achieved that. And we really excel at developing entrepreneurial leaders. We excel at developing students who can lead businesses and lead especially startup enterprises. And we've got a history, certainly over the last 20 years, of having very successful entrepreneurial leaders. And that's why I wanted to create this network, because it's building on the knowledge that we have in the school. My background is engineering. So I have a degree in communication engineering, which I achieved some years ago. And through a series of startups and businesses which I've led, I've come to teach entrepreneurship. My last university was the University of Worcester. And for the last 2 years now, I've been here at the RAU teaching entrepreneurship at all levels of the university. I'd like to now pass you along to Jonty, who's our Programme Manager for the MSc and also a Senior Lecturer in Farm Business Management. Over to Jonty.
Thanks, David. I'm presuming you can all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, I'm Jonathan, or Jonty. I'm the MSc Business Management Programme Manager here at the RAU. I'm also a Senior Lecturer in Farm Business Management. Just a bit of background, my first degree was in Rural Resource Management back in the day at Sealhain. Postgraduate diploma in Environmental Management for Business and Commerce in Sheffield. And this was me again, really trying to link business to environment, which is probably my passion. Postgraduate certificate in Advanced Practice, which is all about lecturing and knowledge exchange, and also lucky to be a Nuffield farming scholar, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Prior to coming to the RAU, I was probably a consultant stroke advisor in the agri-business environmental sector, working with all sorts of clients, from farmers, government departments, charities, national organisations such as the National Trust. And I also run my own diversified or entrepreneurial, I suppose, farming business just north of Cirencester in the middle of the Cotswolds. That's me.
And let's now move on to Yaqub, who's also on the call.
Oh, thank you, David. Good evening. Well, my background is one of consultancy, working within HRM, and also education. I've been in education for about 30 odd years. And out of that has emerged an interest in ethical leadership and coaching, though my background was more HR and organization. In particular, and what brings me to this webinar and working with my colleagues, Jonty and David, is that I'm interested in narrative. I'm interested in stories, and I'm interested in the stories that need to be told. So one of the things I've experienced is working with clients, whether they be from blue chip corporates right the way down to individuals with whom I'm coaching. They have a story to tell. They love telling their story, if we're prepared to listen, which for a talker like me is always an amazing challenge. But the importance of getting these stories out, both individually and indeed for organizations when it's a change context we're talking about, where people can level and talk honestly about what it is that's affecting them, it is really most powerful. And that brings me here this evening.
Okay, thank
David.
you. Thank you, Yaqub. So now we're going to just introduce you to my story, just to provide you some background and also some learning points that I've had over the last 20 odd years. When you look back, it's certainly, the dates all look very old. So first of all, in 1998, I learned a very serious lesson about selecting my co-founders. And at the beginning, I wasn't particularly wise in who I married up to as a business partner. I was probably more wise in selecting my wife than I was in selecting a business partner, and that's a shocking thing to do. So I just want to take you back to 1988. At that time, we were in the middle of what we call the dot-com bubble. And the dot-com bubble meant that there was so much money being swung about for anything to do with new technology. So I met with this chap, and this chap I won't name, but he and I came up with an idea to do some consultancy work and bid for some work with a very large mobile phone operator in Germany. And they were doing a request for tender. We wrote the document. It was literally a weekend's work. And we ended up getting this multi-million-pound project. And basically, it was to source and install some equipment in a German mobile phone operator. We needed about 15 people to be on the project to get it done, and it was about a 9 to 12 month project. So we bid it for 12 months. And as soon as we got the email and the phone call back to say we've won, my co-founder no longer wanted to do it. So he basically said, I'm not interested in going and doing this in Germany. However, because I put the bid together with you, I want 50% of the profits. And I want you to report to me about everything we spend money on. So I thought, we'd agreed it from day one that we were equal partners, we had equal shareholders, and I was put in a bad position because I said I wanted to do it. And as soon as I said that, he was very happy that I was willing to take all the risks and go and do all this. And he could sit at home and have the profits. So we had a very heated exchange, and I started the project. He was going to still get some profits, but not all 50%. And I put this team together, and this team I had to get together very quickly. So I reached out to a colleague who I'd worked with before, and I asked this guy whether he would like to come to Germany and help with this team. I'd never run a team that big before, that project before. And this chap who joined me in that was going through some difficulties at home with his wife and children, and basically came to Germany to get away from that situation, and ended up forming a culture within the team of going out drinking in Germany, which there's a lot of. And basically I then had to manage this chap who was a lot older than me, and trying to get him to turn up to work early, and also manage the customer's expectation, because he was clearly drunk while on the job. So my first learning point is select your co-founders very wisely, and even people that you work with, being team colleagues, you need to select them. And this was an absolute nightmare scenario, which I ended up walking away with very little profit. You'd think I'd have learned some lessons, but again in 2002 I moved forward to create another business, and this business was helping 3G license bids with operators all across Europe. And it was these license bids at the time were reaching about £5 billion per license, and our role was to develop the technical plan and the business case to ensure that profitability of the license bid, if it, because it was £5 billion, a lot of money, and we'd also go to the banks and support the potential licensee to borrow the money from the banks. So I created a business with some other co-founders of 50 people working in this business. They were all working 6 days a week in 10 countries, from Israel to Norway, across the whole of Europe. And I was very, very busy running this business. We were getting paid a lot of money, and we were very successful at winning bids. And our customers loved us, and they moved us from one country to the next country as these license bids were happening. But what happened was all the countries that were doing 3G license bids had done them, and suddenly I had a business that was running 3G license bids and no longer any customers. So this company failed, and it failed amazingly. It was literally driving a car against a wall and crashing it. 1 month you're invoicing £1 million a month, the next month nothing. And I really, really suffered in this crash. And so when I brought in the liquidators, I spent a lot of time with the liquidators trying to understand how businesses exit. And so it's really important when you start a business to know how you could exit without losing your skin. And that's a key learning point for anybody that starts a business, is what is the exit plan. In 2004, I moved on into another business. I love starting businesses, which was a games business. And I started this with another business partner who I had a great deal of respect for and still do. And we decided to split the operations and the sales of the business. So we had this motto: we either make stuff or we sell stuff. And I decided to do the selling of the stuff. Now, I'm an engineer, and engineers typically don't like speaking to people, never mind selling. So I'd selected to do some sales. And you would imagine that this would not be playing to my strengths. But actually, on reflection, I enjoy selling. I enjoy talking to people, and I enjoy talking to people about things I like. And I had a passion for the games, I had a passion for mobile phones, I had a passion for the technology, and actually it worked really well. So in a matter of a few years, we had 160 customers in 60 countries around the world, and we were a very successful business. So playing to your strengths is really important, but sometimes your strengths are not the ones you think. So that's a very important lesson I learned. In 2006, I was again that same business, and what I learned there is that leadership and management are different skills. So when you start a business, you're more of a supervisor if you've got some staff, and then you move on to management. And if your business grows to be sufficiently big or over time, then you move into leadership. And leadership is really where an entrepreneur should be in their business. And that trick of knowing what stage your business is in and what amount of leadership, management and supervision you need in that business is really important for that business to flourish. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't get that. They either stay being a supervisor and micromanaging people, or they become a manager but not a leader, and people don't follow them. And my last point, which I want to bring up in my story here, is that as an entrepreneur, I think it's really important to develop the core processes which are geared to the refinement of scalable, repeatable and profitable business models. So what that means is in the early stage of a business, you need to develop processes, and not a lot of people look at the processes in the business and see how they can make these a repeatable process. Because if they're repeatable, then the quality of the product is repeatable, and if it's repeatable, then you can scale it to ensure you're profitable. And that statement there is really key for me as an entrepreneur. Is as an entrepreneurial leader, how do I develop the core processes in this business which will help me make a business which is scalable, repeatable and profitable? So that's the real reflection of 20 years of being an entrepreneur. That's one of the key things, I think, as an entrepreneur. Okay, so that's my story. And what I want to do now is move on to Jonty. So Jonty, tell us a little bit about your story, your journey in the world, especially within rural entrepreneurship.
Thank you, David. A very different story, I guess, to yours, which I think is quite interesting as a comparison. Born in 1969, a 60s child to a farming family in Nottinghamshire, arable farming or mixed farming in the day, but ended up being all arable. 3 elder brothers. So straight into family business issues of succession and power and who does what and what does dad do, and there was an uncle in there as well. Not entrepreneurial at all. A little bit of enterprise, I suppose, which is slightly different to entrepreneurship. We can talk definitions all day, but it stayed a small farm that focused on food production, so there was no room for me. So I went down my own route, I guess, and followed my passion, and always enjoyed doing things differently. And even back in the 80s when I went to university, I was really interested in this thing called natural capital or public goods, or this thing called the multifunctionality of land. Farmland isn't just for food production, it is for everything, for tourism, for access, for fresh air, for beautiful landscapes, for tranquility, for culture and heritage, as well as food. And that links to the wider rural economy, and jobs and community and happiness as well, and well-being in rural areas. So moved away from pure agriculture to something a lot wider. And that's what I studied at university. Became an advisor stroke consultant for working for people like the National Trust, the Peak District National Park, and eventually for a private consultancy here in the Cotswolds. And my passion, I guess, has always been for joining the dots, promoting food, farming, environment, linking that to diversification and what you might call eco-entrepreneurship. How do we make the most of our natural assets, our natural capital assets, and build a business from that? 2004, post foot and mouth. The farming industry was on its knees, and that's when I took a real risk and got back into pure agriculture and got my first and only farm tenancy on a farm in the for the National Trust in the Cotswolds, just up the road from here. And that was a big risk. You know, I had 2 children, a nice little house, a nice comfy job with a pension, and I risked everything to get this farm business working. And I suppose that's one trait of an entrepreneur, to spot an opportunity, to take a risk, to make things happen, and to put everything on the line really and work your balls off to make it happen. Always enjoyed telling stories, whether that was giving advice, consultancy, facilitating groups, bringing students to my farm. And that led me to the RAU, where someone said, oh, you quite like talking to students and helping young farmers and entrepreneurs. Why don't you come and do a bit of lecturing? And in 2014, I got a job here and formalized, I guess, that storytelling role and that passion, that interest in multifunctionality of land. And that's where I am today.
Thanks, Jonty. Can you explain a little bit more about your farm? Because I believe it's quite a diverse and unique farm.
Definitely unique. So Connigree Farm, if you want to Google it, www.connigreefarm.co.uk. It's only 180 acres. It's not a big farm. It was let by the National Trust as a part-time farm on purpose. They basically wanted someone to farm it, to manage it, to graze it, but to diversify. They wanted an entrepreneurial young farmer in there. So yes, we've got cattle, we've got sheep, we've got pigs, all rare breed. Again, looking for a unique selling point. We're too small to do numbers. We had to do something different. So it's rare breed, organic, and pasture fed, which is crucial. We've got a livery for horses, and it's an organic livery again. We're trying to do it slightly differently. And we're interested in short supply chains, where all our meat is sold direct in a box to local customers at a premium price. And for me, selling meat is all about storytelling. It's about trust, which is where the Pasture for Life and the organic logo and certification comes in, but it's about storytelling. I meet all my customers face to face. I walk them around the farm. I show them what we do, and that is the added value for me. And that, again, is probably a bit of an entrepreneurial trait, getting closer to your consumer, trying to understand them, and always seeking feedback and to improve, and probably a bit of an ego thing there as well, about wanting that feedback and that face-to-face contact. So meat, and then there's the livery, and then there's all the environmental stuff that we do, which underpins everything that we do on the farm. We're just about to launch, and this is why I'm really interested in entrepreneurship right now, 2 new businesses. Top of your slide there's some vegetables. We're in the Cotswolds, we've got no soil, but I'm working with a young farmer who wants to grow vegetables and fruit and fresh flowers on our farm, where we're going to rebuild soil and basically make it a community supported agriculture type project, where again everything will be sold direct to premium, a bit like Riverford but in smaller scale. So hopefully that'll be kicking off this summer. And again, that takes passion, takes a risk, and for the first time in my career, I'm delegating. Ooh. I'm not going to be doing any of this. I'm not going to be getting muddy hands and fingers. This is going to be a young farmer working with me, for us in partnership. Bottom right there, some teepees. This is going to be our big business this year, next year. We've hosted 1 or 2 weddings on the farm and events, and we're really going for it now. We've just won a grant scheme to buy all these big teepees and a catering tent and a bar and mobile toilets. And that's where we're now at, the experiential, getting people onto the farm and helping us celebrate and have a fun time on the farm. And good money in that. And that's, again, it's all about getting close to the customer, listening to what they want, making things bespoke and a little bit unique. So all sorts of things going off on the farm.
But there's a lot of pressure on farmers and landowners to be more enterprising. So can you expand on this a little?
Absolutely. I mean, farming is a tough job at the best of times, and the slide that's up now, if you look at go far right and look at the all farms column, just to give a quick picture, the dark blue box on that column below the line, that's the food production bit in agriculture. These are DEFRA figures, losers money. There's no profit in the food production bit. These are figures from 2 years ago. Every year differs slightly, but this is quite typical. Above the line are the things that make money. The light blue box is the subsidy from Europe, which is going to go. The darker blue box is the money that comes in from diversification or enterprise or entrepreneurship, crucial to profit of the farm business. The whitish box is from the environmental stuff that most farmers do. So you can see how crucial not only subsidy is, which is going to go, how crucial enterprise and doing things differently and diversification is. But this is nothing new. Over 64% of farmers are already diversified. Been diversifying since the year dot. When I was at university in the 80s, early 90s, we were teaching diversification and farm enterprise particularly. So it's going to be very competitive out there, whatever happens with, I'm going to say the B word, Brexit, but it's going to be very tough. And subsidy is going to disappear, so that light box goes down. So how are we going to survive? So all farmers, lots of people are scrabbling around right now trying to find new ways of doing business and new business models and new ideas.
So there is a financial driver to diversify the farm. Are there more benefits than just improvement to the bottom line?
Absolutely. Number one on there, we hope that it increases income. If you get it right, boost your profit, maybe increase your asset value, which is quite important as well in agriculture, particularly when you're a farm tenant. But it's also about just utilising your underused assets too. You're sweating your assets. That might be your buildings, your land that you have, the products that you produce. That most farmers are price takers, but with a bit of entrepreneurship, you can become a price maker through adding value and shorter supply chains. Making better use of your cash or your borrowing ability, your time maybe. Your farming is seasonal, so you can find different things to do with your time and skills and labour force. It's about reducing risk. Done a bit of work on resilience and how mixed farming can be more resilient to fluctuations, either in prices or weather. And that's important. These things are volatility in agriculture is only going to get worse. And seeking security, yes, financial security, but also family business security. Getting sons, daughters, uncles, aunties working together, it can be a very lonely business. So diversification can help that. Build a bit of family cohesion, more eyes per acre, more people on the ground, more of a community around the family business. And tradition, it's often the diversified business or the new enterprise that props up the older, the more traditional bits of your farm business. It might be the Herdwick sheep in Cumbria. Very hard to make a living out of Herdwick sheep, but it's the tourism, maybe adding value to wool, maybe some added value to some meat that will make the money that helps preserve the Herdwick breed, which people come to visit and love seeing on the hills. So there's something there about just supporting tradition, which is really crucial in farming. And then there's personal benefits too, a bit of mindset stuff, I guess, increasing adaptability. Once you've done one business, once you've lifted your nose from the grindstone, your ability to change, to grow, to respond to opportunities improves, I think, and that's crucial. Developing new skills and self-confidence, useful for your core business as well as your diversified businesses. Networks, how often have you seen farmers just working 24/7? You might get to the pub once a month if you're lucky. No longer sit on the parish council. You can't got time to go to the conferences or the meetings. But through diversification or being entrepreneurial, you make new contacts and they'll bring all sorts of benefits to you, business-wise and personally. And often overlook this one, but it can be fun. Diversification, you can take a hobby, build a business out of it, really go for it, and that can add all sorts of benefits. If you get it right, improving personal resilience. Get it wrong, increase your stress, and really put you under pressure. So you have to be really careful. Where's he gone? Sustainability. Yeah, just to mention really that a key role that rural entrepreneurship, if you get it right, should be there to regenerate the local economy, environment, and community, and not to diminish, not to impact, not too much economic leakage. If you've got a nice farm shop, try and buy local. Don't just buy avocados from New Zealand or wherever. Think about how you can build sustainability and regenerative business into your business plan. If it's done right, it can have lots of local benefits.
I talked a little bit about my roller coaster ride, but what do you think are the key barriers, particularly to farmers wanting to diversify?
Many and very varied, of course. I think the first one is, have you got the skills, the energy, passion, determination, attitude to risk, that will and desire to work with others, to build a team, to make it happen? You've got to have those traits, I think, to really be a good rural entrepreneur. And maybe to understand yourself. Who are you? What are your strengths? Build on those strengths and minimize those weaknesses. And always keep seeking to grow, develop, and you're sort of flourishing with your business, hopefully. Very often, though, we'll pinpoint some of the practicalities, the practical barriers, access to finance. Can you borrow money? Not easy for farm tenants, maybe. Tenancy issues. Will the landlord support you if you're trying to develop a business on the farm? Market research. If you want to set up a shoe shop in Cirencester, there'll be research there for footfall, average spend, etc. Dwell time in Cirencester. If you want to set up an agritourism venture in the middle of Shropshire, probably no or very little market research that's good for your business focus. You might have a wonderful idea, but can you develop that into a business case? Have you got the capacity to do that? That is often a big barrier. You might develop that business case, but have you got the skills and the training to take it forward, particularly things like marketing and comms skills? You develop your idea, say, for a farm shop, but can you find skilled personnel to actually manage that for you, with you, particularly in rural areas where housing prices are high and transport links are poor? People often don't exist to help you, work with you and be your team. Regulation is a problem. Everyone says planning is the big barrier, but it's not just that. Depending on which sector you're in, it might be food standards or processing, etc. But planning can normally be overcome with some good planning ahead. Lack of access to broadband, still an issue. I do not have proper broadband at home still, which limits the projects that I can develop. And lack of specialist business advice. Again, there's not many experts out there in rural entrepreneurship with some of the rural sectors that are willing to help. So all sorts of barriers.
Thanks for that, Jonty. So before we talk to Yaqub, you mentioned the Nuffield Scholarship. So where does this fit in your story and where you're moving to?
Yeah, just very simply, I mean, very lucky. A couple of years ago now, I got a Nuffield Farming Scholarship. Lord Nuffield, by the way, was William Morris, not the guy who did all that lovely wallpaper, but invented the Morris minor car. Now there's a true entrepreneur. And he put a lot of money into Nuffield Health and something called Nuffield Farming to try and get farmers to get away from their farms, to go and learn from others and bring great ideas back, and to have the confidence to develop new ideas. So I did a study a couple of years ago called Building a Sustainable Farm Business. There's a link there if anybody does want to have a look. But it was really, I travelled the world, Romania, China, America, Italy, Canada, all over Europe, really just seeing great examples of entrepreneurship. And I came up with a number of recommendations or top tips, I suppose, at the end of my report. First one, very quickly, put soil health, natural capital first. Celebrate the role of small farmers. This isn't just about big farmers and tech. Nurture people. We need people to farm. We need people to live in rural areas to make it thrive. Think about outcomes. What do you really want out of life and your business? Not just output, i.e. how many widgets can we produce, or even yield or profit. And effectiveness, not just efficient businesses. Diversity and complexity are key for me, for resilience and all sorts of other reasons. I mentioned this word regenerative. I think that's crucial. We need to rebuild business connection, communities, habitats, understanding. Crucial if we're going to be sustainable in the future. True cost paradigm, I'll put that to one side now, but do we really understand the cost of the things that we do? And finally, and crucially, we must tell our stories in rural areas and celebrate the food, farming, rural tourism industry. And finally, we must be more entrepreneurial if we're going to survive. But to do that, we need the right government policies and programs that foster this. And the RAU and people like the National Trust, who I've worked for in the past, have huge roles to play in that. So yeah, that was my Nuffield.
Thank you, Jonty. So, Yaqub, Jonty's highlighted the storytelling here. Can you summarise your journey and also expand on this concept?
Yeah, sure, David. I think one of the things I'd like to say from the beginning is that I'll weave my part in this story and why I'm here into this as we go along. So let's first just pause a second and take into account what we've heard. David kicked off with an incredibly revealing, very clear, very honest and very transparent story about his own, if you like, successes and failures. But what was superb about that story is exactly what is important to us in telling the stories. And that is the learning that we take from it. And that learning was beautifully exemplified. So we've had David's story, we've had Jonty's story, and in that again, we've heard quite a lot about why storytelling is important. It's lonely. People need support. There are important stories to be told. There's risk, but if it goes well, it's fantastic. If it goes badly, this will really affect your personal resilience. One of the reasons that we need to tell stories is because of their power for change, for growth, for development, and for us to be able to trust in our own personal living knowledge. Now, tying that back in and responding to David's point about my story. I mean, I've been at this university now for coming up to 28 years. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed working with here, and what has excited me here, is the way in which people want to tell their stories. And I really am excited by listening to stories and hearing the stories of our students. It could be the students who come, like Lisa, from family situations, family farming businesses, which are diversifying, where there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity taking place. Alternatively, it can be stories that could affect political change, public policy change. But what is really important about these stories is the energy and the passion. So what I enjoy doing is I enjoy working with students in the shaping of their stories, not taking their research and publishing on the back of it, but encouraging the students to make full sense of their own experience, their lived experience, and what is important in the story that they're telling. And I really relish working with people who also want to tell their stories and turn these into living theories. By living theories, I mean the very difference between what David and Jonty told us tonight, which are these really vibrant entrepreneurial stories. And then being asked to go into a library and pick up a book on entrepreneurialism that is reduced to kind of hard, technical, managerial language. All of the vibrancy shorn from it, all of the humanity. Jonty talked about regenerating communities, families, family situations, working to establish more inclusional practices in agriculture. I mean, this is a story of resilience, of hope, and it really is exciting. So from that point of view, I think what we've heard are two vibrant entrepreneurial stories. Now, what do we do with them? And that is a key question. So we tell our story, but if we just tell it, we might get personal catharsis. Yeah, catharsis, by which I mean working through the process of telling the story and enjoying it, but also processing difficult stuff from it. But what else could we get if we actually publish that story? If David and Jonty were to publish their stories, if we were to bring together publication out of their stories and the stories of others and start getting the vibrant insider knowledge, the unique, personal, living knowledge that can only be achieved by listening to people's stories, picking up on the power of this medium, and then, yes, and then disciplining the stories. That's the tough bit. Take it from me. Disciplining the stories in the form of something that is readable, publishable, that people can connect with, or turning them into another kind of story. And so one of the things that came out from Jonty's entrepreneurial roller coaster in particular was it can be lonely out there. Well, why does it need to be lonely out there? Why should it be lonely out there? If we can pull together through webinars, through the passion, the excitement, the commitment, and the sheer importance of the entrepreneurial stories around us, if we can pull them together and create an entrepreneurial coaching community network where there's a professional identity, a personal identity, a family identity, where it's perfectly okay to share and talk about our stories, to actually tell people who we are. And there's a lovely book by John Powell, which I often recommend to clients and to students. Why am I afraid to tell you who I am? And what we're overcoming here this evening in listening to these stories and sharing them is we've got two guys who are unafraid to tell you who they are, unafraid to tell you of the pain, unafraid to tell you of the love, the passion, and the joy. And I think this is why we need, at last, to capture these stories and take them into new media, so we can use the opportunity of webinar to be able to talk and share with a wider community. We can begin to influence entrepreneurial coaching consultancy networks made up of entrepreneurs who have been out there and done it, succeeded, failed, sitting on the cusp, living with apprehension, knowing the pain of getting it wrong, knowing the joy of getting one of David's £1 million invoices away to a client. I mean, this is exciting. And so in all of this, my story is one that I've enjoyed working at the RAU, working with incredible students, working with students like Darcy, for example, who talked about an incredible change in her family, culture, structure, relationships through the sale of a business founded by a grandparent. A story of personal change with Steve Colhoun, who I was working with this afternoon, whose family in Zimbabwe lost their land and went through a period of something equivalent to post-traumatic stress disorder, but have emerged from it stronger through calling on their faith and using their faith and their belief to find a new vision, a new strategy, a way not just of coping and surviving, but a way of finding life-affirming energy to thrive and carry into the future. What is exciting with David's story is that in coming in as head of the school, he's also fostered a delight and a pleasure in colleagues getting together and saying, look, there's textbook knowledge. Come on, let's give it its name, propositional knowledge, propositional theory, which tells you this is how it is for entrepreneurs. And I guess 60–70% of the entrepreneurs who read those texts go, but actually that does not represent my experience. So what would? Well, I imagine the telling of those stories by those entrepreneurs would be personal knowledge. It would be personal knowing. And I have students this year working on exciting stories of their own lived experience. Okay, they are not necessarily entrepreneurs, but they will be. They're keen to be. They come from families where there are entrepreneurial aspects to their family farms, for example. So all in all, what's really important is that we provide a space, like this webinar space, where people's stories can be produced, shared as for what they are. They are living theories of entrepreneurial lives. And I think that these really need to be picked up, gathered, nurtured, and disciplined and shaped into something that we can take, where we can take the story on. We can publish it. We can take an entrepreneurial coaching consultancy network comprising of people who are actually experiencing the pleasure, the fear, the excitement, the loneliness, and also the incredible sort of what's it like to get a judgment wrong when we're selecting a partner? What's it like? Well, David has told us what it's like. And he's told us about and hinted at the pain of it and the difficulty. But look at the learning from the action. David has taken that, and like Donald Shon suggests, he's turned it into reflection in action and reflection on past action. And he's moved it forward. And these are the exciting things that a network of people who are interested in entrepreneurialism, and particularly what it means for personal and collective leadership in the rural sector, what it can mean, what it can do, and what we can bring through it. And this is the beginning this evening. And my story is really being part of this movement in the RAU, and it's a great movement. David, back over to you. I hope that answers your question, if in a, shall we say, discursive manner.
Thank you, Yaqub. So that's the introduction to the three of us and our stories. And what I wanted to do now is opening it up to anybody that wanted to ask any questions of the audience.